Right, hello, welcome to another different Royal Rota. Hi Lizzie, how are you?
Hello from South London. How are you?
How's the self-isolating going?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Because you're still in touch with people, because you're not actually seeing anyone face to face. It just feels different, doesn't it? It feels like someone's shut you away.
I know it feels very odd, but I was saying to someone yesterday, thank goodness that we can do video calls. Otherwise, it would be
Yeah, yeah.
really bad.
I said that to my neighbour. She brought around some flowers that she was allergic to. She thought we might want them, and she said, "God, what did we do like 10 years ago before we had before we had Wi-Fi and FaceTime and Zoom and House Party and all these things?"
Definitely, they're definitely keeping me sane, and lots of online workouts and various
Are you
calls.
doing the PE with Joe, which all the other nation's children are doing?
No, I haven't done that
No.
one. But are you?
Yeah, I've done a few, I have to say. And it does get you up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I wonder whether Prince Charles is doing them now, because at least he's out of his coronavirus self-isolation, and we will talk about that in more detail. But I think a lot of people were quite relieved to see him give his message this week.
Yes, very nice to see him up and about. Shall I go through it'll be very quick rundown of what's been happening?
Yes, the sort of limited, scaled back Robinson's Royal Rundown. Go for it.
I know. I think you gave me a minute to begin with when this first started, but now I think...
I'll give you 15 seconds now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as you say, Prince Charles this week out of self-isolation, which is good news. And we saw him for the first time giving words in a video message in support of Age UK, who he is patron of. The Sussexes made their departure as working members of the royal family this week. That feels like it's been a long time, a long build up to that.
Yeah, and there's a lot to discuss there and about the changes and all the rest of it, but yeah, this happened.
Finally, we had some new photographs of the Cambridges. They were calling some mental health charities that they've worked quite closely with, and some photographs were published of them over the weekend.
Right, and other than that, they've all been keeping themselves to themselves as best they can, as we all are. Just a reminder, the Queen is in Windsor with the Duke of Edinburgh. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are in Anmer Hall in Norfolk. Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall are at Burke Hall at Balmoral. And we don't really talk about Harry and Meghan anymore because they're not royal. So,
although you've been saying that for a long time, we're still talking
up until the 31st of March, which was on Tuesday, they were still royal and they were living in Los Angeles. So, if the royals, once known as Harry and Meghan, are currently living in Los Angeles. I think we should probably start with Prince Charles, shouldn't we? I mean, that was the big news last week, that he'd contracted coronavirus, and then went on to the Prime Minister had got it, and the Health Secretary in the UK had got it as well. I was a little bit surprised when we got the news on Monday, wasn't it? Monday afternoon, that he'd come out of isolation, but then actually that is the rule. It's a 7-day rule. He'd contracted it the weekend before, even though they didn't announce it until the Wednesday. So by Monday night, he was out of isolation.
Yeah, he'd had his test the Monday before, after suffering those mild symptoms, and those test results hadn't come back until late on the Tuesday, and we didn't find out about it until Wednesday. So it felt very quick then to hear on Monday that he was out of self-isolation after consulting with a doctor, but actually he had fulfilled those 7 days, which is the criteria.
Yes. Yeah, his 7 days were done. But poor old Camilla, because of her husband had got the symptoms and therefore tested positive, she's got to do the whole 2 weeks, the 14 days.
The 14 days, yeah. So she tested negative. She hasn't shown any symptoms, but that period is longer if you've shown no symptoms, because it can take a while for those to come through. So she, as we're speaking now, is still self-isolating.
Yeah. What I can't work out though is where he's had it and has come through it, and presumably is no longer infectious, whether he can see her. That I don't know. She obviously can't see anyone else in the household in Burke Hall, but I can't work out whether the two of them can see one another. I don't know what those medical rules are.
I would guess, and again, I don't know, that they would err on the side of caution and probably keep them. If she's self-isolating, I would imagine she's probably self-isolating.
You could say enjoying the peace, but that one might be wrong. So the whole time he was in isolation, we only really saw him once, which is when he did that sort of nationwide clap for the nation clap for the NHS workers on
clap for our carers.
Thursday. That's right. And then suddenly this week we got a video message from him, and I think he recorded it for Age UK, which is a charity that looks after older people here in the UK. But actually, it was a kind of message, a personal message from him to the rest of the country suffering from the lockdown.
Yeah. So it was put out, as you say, under the Age UK, him supporting older people in his role as patron. But it did feel like the message went a lot wider than that. It was sort of hailing NHS workers, it was hailing the volunteers that have signed up to help the NHS, it was talking about people who are further emergency services, which are the people working in our supermarkets and shops at the moment. And it was also kind of giving people a message of hope, talking about, we don't know when we're going to come out of this, but out of this we will come. Yeah,
and I thought quite interesting how he not only thanked the NHS workers, the health workers, the doctors, the nurses, all on the front line, but actually he made a point of actually recognising all those that are keeping the food supplies going, and not just stocking the supermarket shelves, but delivering the food, getting it into the supermarkets and on the supermarket shelves.
Yeah, and he also talked a little bit about how key people should be treated with sort of special consideration when coming off duties. So he's talking about those people that are key workers trying to support and help all of us, and then they're potentially going to try and do their shopping, and we need to show special consideration for them when they are trying to still live.
And he started the message by talking about his own effect, his own condition with coronavirus. It's probably worth, rather than us just tell you everything that he said, I think we probably should listen to it in full. It's about 4 minutes long, isn't it, or so? Yeah, but it's probably worth just listening to everything that he's got to say, not just about himself, the NHS workers, the supermarket workers, and also just how we're all kind of coping as a country at the moment.
Having recently gone through the process of contracting this coronavirus, luckily with relatively mild symptoms, I now find myself on the other side of the illness, but still in no less a state of social distance and general isolation. As we're all learning, this is a strange, frustrating and often distressing experience when the presence of family and friends is no longer possible and the normal structures of life are suddenly removed. At such an unprecedented and anxious time in all our lives, my wife and I are thinking particularly of all those who have lost their loved ones in such very difficult and abnormal circumstances, and of those having to endure sickness, isolation and loneliness. As patron of Age UK and my wife the patron of Silverline, our hearts go out to all those older people throughout this country who are now experiencing great difficulty. However, we also know that in every community up and down this land, where people of all ages are being affected by this virus, there are truly wonderful neighbours, individuals and groups of volunteers who are providing ceaseless care and attention to those most at risk, and that all this network of selfless assistance is in itself helping to provide vital support and reassurance to the hard-pressed professional services. And at a time when doctors, nurses and all the vital ancillary staff that form the backbone of our remarkable NHS are increasingly under such enormous strain and risk as they battle heroically to save lives in intensive care centres and to contain, as much as possible, the spread of this virus, our thoughts and prayers are very much with those marvellous people whose extraordinary skills and utter selfless devotion to duty and the care of their patients make us so very proud. Indeed, it has been so wonderful to see just how many across the United Kingdom have signed up in their hundreds of thousands to be NHS volunteers, offering their help to do whatever they can to provide support to those on the front line. It is clearly essential, therefore, that such key people are treated with special consideration when coming off their exhausting duties and trying to do their shopping, for instance, while having to contend with constant anxiety about their own families and friends. In this regard, we also think of all those many shop workers who are toiling as hard as they can throughout each and every night to keep supermarket shelves stocked, a further emergency service on which we are all relying. As a nation, we are faced by a profoundly challenging situation, which we are only too aware threatens the livelihoods, businesses, and welfare of millions of our fellow citizens. None of us can say when this will end, but end it will. Until it does, let us try and live with hope and, with faith in ourselves and each other, look forward to better times to come.
So we don't know when it will end, but end it will. Trying to, finish his video message there on a rather positive note.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a rallying cry, isn't it? Trying to give people hope in these sort of times that everyone doesn't know when this is going to end, but he's sort of trying to give a positive ending to his message.
Yeah, look after one another, look out for yourselves, and we look forward to better times to come. I mean, those times feel like a bit of a long way off at the moment, don't they?
Yeah, and he does recognise in the message that it is strange, frustrating, and an often distressing experience, and I think that's for whoever you are, including, Prince Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. So William and Kate, again, they can't physically go and do any visits. The last one they did was the one that you went on, which is that NHS 111 call centre that they visited. But they're still trying to keep in touch with some of their charities that are dealing with coronavirus. Yeah,
particularly around mental health. We know they're big advocates for supporting mental health charities. And at the weekend, 2 photographs were published, one of the Duchess on the telephone and one of the Duke. And that came at a time when Public Health England guidance had given some tips on how to look after your mental health, which those tips were endorsed by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. So they spoke to Paul Farmer, who is the chief executive of the mental health charity Mind, and the chief executive of Place to Be, which is helping improve children's mental health in schools, and is a charity that the Duchess is patron of.
Now, I mean, mental health is a big issue. I mean, it was obviously one that means a lot to William and Kate, and also previously it was something that Prince Harry used to speak about a lot. But I think it's probably being one of the concerns. Coronavirus is clearly the key health concern, but perhaps one of the side effects of this whole lockdown is that there will be a lot of people not just struggling with physical health, but with mental health.
Yeah, it's a very strange time and an unusual time for people to be sort of self-isolating. We don't do that, and it's something that William and Kate have been engaged with mental health since the start of this crisis.
Do you know what I've been finding really odd is that when you, like, for example, when you go out for your daily exercise, or, the rules here, if you're watching outside the UK, we're allowed out once a day for some form of exercise, is that when you do see people that you know, as inevitably you do, they back away from you. And I think as humans, we find that a bit, it's still in your head, you can understand why they're doing it, but you feel slightly insulted that someone is actually backing away from you when normally you come close, you might hug, you might touch, and actually everything just feels different, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And those aren't the only 2 charities they've spoken to. Yesterday, which was the 1st of April, they spoke to staff at 2 hospitals here, including the Queen's Hospital in Burton, which is where sadly the first confirmed hospital frontline worker died from coronavirus. So they're very much involved and trying to kind of play their part and still carry out some kind of role, even if that has to be on the telephone.
Yeah, we've now had 4 or 5 NHS frontline workers who have sadly died from coronavirus. Nothing like Italy, where it's something horrendous like 60 or more. But I think again that's something that I'm sure William and Kate will be extremely concerned about.
Yeah, and they said when we were on that 111 visit in Croydon, the Duke of Cambridge was speaking to the chief executive there about how maybe kind of in the weeks to come how they would be playing their role virtually and maybe carrying out engagements virtually, and we can see that they are trying to stay engaged and in touch, even if that has to be on the phone.
Now, again, someone else who's doing that is the Duchess of Cornwall. She's been using her time in isolation to talk about an issue very close to her heart, which is domestic violence. And actually, for we might think we've got problems being inside our houses and not being able to go out. People who have really got bigger problems than that are those for whom the home isn't a safe place, where they have an abusive partner, where things in the home are really quite challenging. And that's something that she's spoken about before. She made a speech quite recently, didn't she, about abuse in the home, and the Duchess has put out another message on that very issue.
Yeah, she made a very important speech at the start of the Women of the World Festival around domestic violence, and this week she put out, it was a message on their social media channels in text, so we didn't see her in video form, but she said, how for some of us it's even harder at the moment because home is not a safe place, and she wanted those people to know that they're not alone, and there were numbers that they could call if they needed, and those numbers were listed on the websites.
And I know some police forces in the UK have also been put out a similar message on that whole issue of domestic violence, that if you are living in a house where your partner is abusive, we haven't forgotten you. You can still call us. This is a challenging time for the emergency services and first responders, but you can still call us. It's probably therefore worth having a little listen. I know, as you just said, Lizzie, the Duchess didn't do a video message, but let's listen to that speech that she did at the Women of the World Festival, because this is a really, really big issue, and particularly at a time when we're all locked in our houses. I think there'll be plenty of people who will want to hear what she's got to say about the issue of domestic violence.
3/4 of violence against women happens in a place where a woman should feel safest, her own home. And just imagine, 1 in 4 women in this country will suffer domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 4. I find it almost impossible to think that any friend of mine might be living under that horrific threat without my knowing it. But that is the power of coercive control and violence in the home. It is characterised by silence. Silence from those who suffer, silence from those around them, and silence from those who perpetrate abuse. This silence is corrosive. It leaves women, children, and men carrying the burden of shame. It prevents them from speaking out about the abuse, and it prevents them from getting help. And at its worst, it can be fatal.
And therefore, it's probably worth us just telling you where you can go if you need to get further help. I mean, it was on the Clarence House Instagram page, wasn't it, Lizzie, where the Duchess wrote about what numbers you call, depending on which part of the UK you're in. There's also the charity Refuge, the charity Safe Lives.
The numbers for the National Domestic Abuse Helpline are all on the Clarence House Instagram page, as you say, and those charities there also have various online resources if needed.
And of course, if you are in any immediate danger, then you call 999, or if you're watching this outside the UK, 911. I mean, domestic abuse isn't just confined to here, sadly. Right, let's talk, shall we, about the other big event this week, the departure, the big exit, the finale, however you want to call it. I mean, it would have been such big news. Tuesday night into Wednesday, the 31st of March was the official departure date of Harry and Meghan. Still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but from now on, they're not using their HRH titles. They're no longer taking money from the sovereign grant. They're able to earn their money independently and sort out their own finances. You know, and yet, I mean, completely overshadowed, inevitably and obviously and understandably, by coronavirus.
Yeah, it's sort of, well, firstly, it feels like it's been a long time coming since we had that announcement that they wanted to leave, and then various subsequent announcements about how that process would happen. But yeah, in ordinary times, I think we would have all done a lot more around their departure, but it just sort of happened really without much of an event. And actually, I think they recognise that at the moment the focus should very much be, of course, on coronavirus.
Yeah, I think it would have been a misstep, wouldn't it, by Harry and Meghan to sort of make a big deal of their departure, and they did say that they think the world's focus should be on coronavirus. Nevertheless, we got some sort of detail, didn't we? Their Instagram page, even though it's got 11.3 million followers, that's not being updated anymore. That's pretty much being dormant. The other brand new website they set up in January, sussexroyal.com, updated, and now it's going to be dormant because they can't use the name Royal anymore. So they've literally ditched all of that. And it kind of sort of shows you how things have changed since they announced their departure, because they wanted to keep all this stuff. They still wanted to be called Sussex Royal and have a Sussex Royal Charity Foundation, and all that's had to be put in the trash can.
The trash can. Yeah, that's one big thing they've lost. And those websites and the Instagram page, if you're searching for them, you still will be able to find them. They will still exist, but they'll just be inactive from now on. So you'll be able to see all their former posts and former messages that they've put up there, but they will not be posting any more from this new position that they're in.
I mean, I thought that they would just rename their Instagram page, you know, keep those 11.3 million followers, because they're people who followed Harry and Meghan, but they're having a sort of completely clean break. They're not even, you know, they don't want to be accused of taking their sort of royal followers effectively, or from the life when they were royal, with them into their new life, and they're just literally having a clean break from all of those things. And
the other thing that will go is their Sussex Royal Foundation that they were building. That won't continue. That's being wound up. The primary initiative that was underway, kind of under that branding, was Harry's Sustainable Tourism Initiative Travelist, and that has begun being established, and that will continue, but it will continue now as an independent non-profit organisation. So it won't be part of Sussex Royal, it'll be its own organisation.
And it seems to me that's kind of the only thing that's going to stay in the UK. Everything else looks like it's going to be shifted to the other side of the Atlantic and all be run from America, now that we know that Harry and Meghan are living in Los Angeles. Continued debates about their security and who pays for it. We had a bit of...
There's one person that's definitely not paying for it.
Well, one person who isn't paying for it is Canada.
Two people that definitely aren't paying for it.
Because they're not there. And also another person who says, I ain't paying for it, was Donald Trump this week.
Yeah, he put out a very clear tweet, didn't he? There was no confusion there that the Americans will not be paying for their security.
No, and also no one could work out why he felt the need to do it, because Harry and Meghan hadn't asked to have security provided by the United States government, and yet Donald Trump felt the need to put out a tweet saying, love the Queen, love the royal family, Harry and Meghan, welcome to the US, but don't think for a second we're going to look after your security.
Yeah, jumping the gun a bit there, wasn't he?
Yeah, and exactly, and that forced Sussex's hand, if you like, when they still had spokespeople at Buckingham Palace, which they did until midnight on Tuesday. We were told that they've made their own private security arrangements.
Yeah, so they don't tend to comment on security issues, but they did feel in this circumstance, because of the Trump tweet, that their hand was slightly forced. And yeah, we were told they've made their own arrangements, but they haven't cleared up how that's going to work in terms of which bits, whether they're paying for all of it or whether the Metropolitan Police are still providing some of their security. That's still a big question mark.
And that is the big question, isn't it? Like, are British taxpayers still effectively paying for a bit of Harry and Meghan security? Because we think there's something like, 8 police protection officers that have to rotate to cover Harry, Meghan and Archie over that sort of 24-hour period, 7 days a week. They're in a different country, not just in America, but on the other side of America. What's that, sort of 10 hours travel time away? That's still going to cost the Metropolitan Police in London, who provide security for the royal family, quite a bit of money.
Yeah, and they weren't clear on that. They just said privately funded security arrangements have been made. And when they were in Canada, they had, of course, the Metropolitan Police plus the Canadians providing security. So
the Mounties in Canada, and then the Canada sort of said quite clearly, didn't they? Well, when this all ends and when they stop being royal, we ain't paying for them. So effectively, they're now living the life of some well-known celebrities in Los Angeles, where there are plenty of other celebrities. We now know that they're also using the very well-known Hollywood PR firm Sunshine Sachs, and they their office at Buckingham Palace is shut. Effectively, they're living the life of, I don't know, what was the equivalent of George and Amal Clooney or Brad Pitt, I don't know, Angelina Jolie. It's kind of it's a different life that they're now living, and they're living it in Los Angeles, in California, and Buckingham Palace is ceased to be part of their lives.
Yeah, and they've recruited another well-known name as their chief of staff and new executive director of their new non-profit organisation, and that's Catherine St. Laurent, who used to work for the Gates Foundation.
Which is quite a smart move. She worked for Bill and Melinda Gates, and now she's going to work for the Sussexes, both also very well-known personalities who also want to start this non-profit, charitable, philanthropic, whatever you call it, organisation. Details to come. But of course, if they were going to announce it this month, I think that's probably all been shelved for some point later in the year.
Yeah, I think they understand they're going to spend the next few months focusing on their family and sort of their new lives. And I think they say they'll be continuing to do what they can safely and privately to support and work with pre-existing charitable commitments and developing their new non-profit organisation. So I'm not sure that over the coming months, particularly with everything that else is going on in the world with coronavirus, that we're going to hear very much from the Sussexes. I think that'll be them off quietly for a while.
Yeah, I think it's the wrong time to decide to turn the spotlight on yourself, isn't it? Definitely.
I can't think we'll be hearing very much from them. They haven't got the Instagram page anymore to be posting messages and updates. So I don't think we'll be hearing very much at all.
So we'll just have to wait to hear where this chapter goes next. But whether we discuss it on the Royal Rota or not, given that they're no longer royal, although we should point out that they've left the institution of the royal family, they are no longer working royals. Harry does remain the Duke of Sussex, which was a title given to him by the Queen, and he still remains, number 6 in line to the throne. Archie's number 7, so that doesn't change.
That doesn't change, and I think they've all been at pains to say throughout this that while they're not working members of the family anymore, they are still part of the family. So
yes,
the business part, they might not be part of, but they're still very much part of the sort of family unit.
Yeah, and actually I wrote a blog this week about, just a sort of, maybe it's like a final post on Harry and Meghan about where we all think it went wrong. And it's actually quite hard. I mean, you have some people in some of the palaces who say, look, we couldn't give them enough. They had their own house, their own staff, they had extra money, extra resources, their own household, their own suite of offices, whatever. They had liberty to do whatever they wanted. Other palaces say they were like children at Christmas time. You keep giving them presents, and after Christmas they still want some more presents. And yet the view from the Sussex team and the people around Harry and Meghan was that they never really felt supported. They never really felt like anyone in the royal family properly put their arms around Meghan and made her feel welcome. Yeah,
I mean, as you say, it's hard to know exactly when it went wrong, but I think we both knew for a long time leading up to sort of that bombshell announcement, even though that announcement took us by surprise, we did know that they weren't happy, and they were looking to develop their role differently. And I don't think anyone expected it to be quite this different, but we knew that they weren't happy in the current state. I mean, if you remember when we were on tour with them, the things they were saying to Tom Bradby, Meghan saying it's not enough just to survive, which is, I think, what they were doing. And all I think anyone can hope is that this new life they've created for themselves, however painful that's been to get to that point, that they do find some kind of happiness.
Yeah, we wish them every happiness. We wish them every success. I think there's every chance they will be extremely successful. They're both, tenacious and committed and ambitious. They've got plenty of ideas. Just look at the things that Meghan has made work in the past, like that Together cookbook and the Smart Set collection. If you remember that far back, it seems like years away, doesn't it? When she was helping people who were in a much less fortunate situation than herself. And I suspect they will be very successful indeed. In what form or in what areas, we simply don't know at this time.
No, but I mean, we're already, as this is published on Friday the 3rd of April, just check I've got my dates right, we will see Meghan's first role as a non-working royal in the Disney. She's narrated a Disney film, Elephants, and the money from that will go to help the charity Elephants Without Borders. But we're already seeing the kind of things that they can do outside of the family.
And actually, Elephants Without Borders is one of those charities that Harry went and visited when he was on his tour in Southern Africa in the autumn of last year, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I think it's a very important charity, particularly to both of them, but particularly to him.
Well, like I say, whatever they do, I'm sure they're going to be extremely successful. Whether or not we talk about them on here or not, let's see.
I suspect we will.
I think we will. Well, listen, you can't do your Robinson's Royal roundup for the future, can you? Because we don't know what's happening. No. Apart from, as you said, Meghan's thing on Friday, but
we do know. I mean, we don't really talk about it on here, but we do know that the Queen is still holding her weekly audiences. She held one this week again on the telephone with her Prime Minister, who has also contracted coronavirus. So they
remember that picture from last week of her and Boris both on the phone.
So they are still continuing to do things, but just in a slightly different way. So we don't know about engagements in the usual way that we normally would. So yes,
a very different way indeed. I mean, and who knows what that means for tours that they had planned coming up, presumably all shelved. We don't even know about the autumn tours. That could be something that gets postponed because travel might not be back in the way that it was before. I mean, there's so many question marks in the air for everyone and everything at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, and I suspect it's going to take a very long time for anything to get back to normal.
So, well, listen, there we are, different world that we're in, different podcasts that we're doing, different conversations we're having to the ones we thought. But I think, from both of us to all of you watching, thanks. Keep safe, keep well. You can always subscribe to the podcast. It's available on Apple, Spotify and other podcast platforms. Just search Royal Rota ITV. We'll still be here on YouTube. We will keep talking about the Royals as long as there's stuff to talk about. I thought we might not have anything this week, and we do. So let's see where we are next week. But in the meantime, from all of us to all of you, keep safe and keep well.